Single mother of two, last moments caught on camera. What they did next was pure evil. At 11:47 p.m. on Friday, March 14, 2019, a fixed security camera outside the Riverton Heights apartment complex captured a woman entering the east stairwell. She carried a grocery bag in her left hand and a set of keys in her right. She paused at the door, shifted the bag against her hip, and looked briefly over her shoulder. The footage has no sound. The timestamp flickers once. She disappears inside. This is the last confirmed image of 32-year-old Lena Moore while she was alive. At first, police believed what followed was a random assault, a wrong place, a wrong time, the kind of explanation that ends questions before they begin. Within 48 hours, that explanation collapsed. Lena Moore lived in Riverton Heights, a low-income complex on the south edge of Dayton, Ohio. She worked nights as a certified nursing assistant at Valley Memorial Hospital. She was raising two children alone. Caleb was 9, Naomi was 6. On weekdays, she slept during the morning hours and woke just in time to walk them home from school. On weekends, she picked up extra shifts. She had no criminal record, no history of substance abuse, no known enemies. On March 14th, she clocked out at 10:58 p.m. Her supervisor confirmed she declined a ride home. She often walked the 8 blocks to her apartment to save money. At 11:19 p.m., she stopped at a corner grocery store. A receipt later recovered showed milk, bread, apples, and chicken soup. Total cost, $12.84. At 11:41 p.m., a traffic camera recorded her crossing Maple Avenue alone. 6 minutes later, she entered the stairwell. At 6:12 a.m. the next morning, a maintenance worker unlocked the same stairwell to investigate a reported water leak. He found Lena on the landing between the first and second floors. She was unresponsive. Her clothing was disordered. There were visible injuries to her face, arms, and legs. Paramedics pronounced her dead at 6:26 a.m. The stairwell showed no signs of forced entry, no broken locks, no damaged cameras. The building's main entrance required a key fob, but the east stairwell door did not. Detectives initially believed Lena had been attacked by a single unknown assailant, a sexual assault followed by fatal blunt force trauma, random violence, a tragedy with no deeper explanation. But the timeline did not support that conclusion. Security footage revealed something else. At 11:44 p.m., 3 minutes before Lena entered the stairwell, 2 men were recorded entering the same door. They did not live in the building. They did not use a key. They waited. They stood against the wall, out of view from the exterior camera. They don't know this yet, investigators would later say, but the camera saw them clearly. Lena had moved to Riverton Heights 2 years earlier after leaving an unstable relationship. Her former partner, Marcus Hill, was the father of her youngest child. Court records showed repeated disputes over child support. He owed more than $8,000 in arrears. Lena had recently filed a motion to garnish his wages. Friends told police she had been anxious in the weeks before her death. She mentioned being followed. She mentioned unfamiliar men asking questions about her schedule. She did not report it formally. Marcus Hill lived less than a mile away. Phone records showed that at 9:03 p.m. on March 14th, Hill sent a text message to an unfamiliar number. The message read, "She gets off around 11." The number belonged to Terrence Cole, age 27. Cole had a prior conviction for robbery. He was unemployed. Cole's phone records placed him near Riverton Heights at 11:32 p.m. The second man seen on camera was later identified as Andre Willis, age 25. Willis had no prior felony convictions, but had been questioned in connection with 2 previous assaults that did not result in charges. The obvious explanation was no longer random. Investigators rewound the timeline. On February 28th, 2 weeks before the murder, Marcus Hill withdrew $1,500 in cash from an ATM. His bank account balance at the time was $1,742. He could not explain the withdrawal. 3 days later, Terrence Cole paid his overdue rent in cash. On March 10th, Hill searched for Riverton Heights on his phone. He also searched for blind spots apartment cameras. On March 13th, the day before the attack, Cole and Willis were recorded on a city bus traveling toward Lena's neighborhood. They exited the bus 2 blocks from her apartment and walked the area for nearly an hour. This was not spontaneous.
This was preparation. On the night of March 14th, Cole and Willis entered the stairwell at 11:44 p.m. They waited. They knew Lena's routine. They knew she walked home. They knew which door she used. At 11:47 p.m., Lena entered. For the next several hours, no one entered or exited the stairwell. At 12:03 a.m., a neighbor reported hearing muffled sounds but did not call police. At 1:17 a.m., another resident heard footsteps and laughter echoing briefly before stopping. No one investigated. They don't know this yet, but the timeline is closing in. The medical examiner determined that Lena was alive for several hours after the initial attack. The cause of death was ruled as multiple traumatic injuries combined with prolonged assault. The report was clinical, precise. It avoided unnecessary detail. Investigators reconstructed the crime minute by minute using phone data. At 12:46 a.m., Terrence Cole's phone connected to a cell tower less than half a mile away. A text message was sent to Marcus Hill. It read, "Done." At 1:02 a.m., Hill replied, "Make sure." At 3:18 a.m., Cole's phone powered down. At 5:41 a.m., Willis placed a call to a prepaid number. The call lasted 23 seconds. At 6:12 a.m., Lena was discovered. The investigation shifted from who to why. Money was part of it. Control was the rest. Prosecutors would later argue that Hill orchestrated the attack as retaliation for the child support filing. He did not intend, he claimed, for Lena to die. He intended to frighten her, to silence her, to remind her who held power. The evidence did not support that claim. On March 18th, police executed a search warrant at Cole's apartment. They recovered Lena's phone, wiped but not destroyed. Forensic technicians retrieved fragments of deleted data. One voicemail remained intact. It was time-stamped 11:48 p.m. It captured 30 seconds of audio before cutting off. It was never played publicly. Willis was arrested the same day after a traffic stop. He initially denied involvement. After 8 hours of questioning, he asked for a lawyer. 2 days later, he agreed to cooperate. His statement outlined the planning, the money, the instructions, the waiting. Marcus Hill was arrested on March 22nd. The trial began on September 9, 2020. Prosecutors presented timelines, phone records, financial data, and surveillance footage. They showed the jury the final image of Lena entering the stairwell. They showed the men waiting inside. The defense argued that Hill did not physically participate, that he did not anticipate the outcome, that the actions of Cole and Willis exceeded any agreement. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. On September 28th, Marcus Hill was convicted of aggravated murder, conspiracy, and felony sexual assault. Terrence Cole and Andre Willis had already entered guilty pleas in exchange for life sentences without parole. Hill was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Lena Moore's children now live with her sister. Caleb is old enough to remember her routines. Naomi remembers the sound of her keys. The stairwell camera still records every entrance. What happened to Lena was not the result of chance. It was the result of entitlement, resentment, and planning. It began with a belief that another person's life could be controlled. It ended with 3 men in prison and 2 children growing up without their mother. The warning is simple and uncomfortable. Violence rarely arrives unannounced. It is preceded by signals, by patterns, by people who believe consequences do not apply to them. The camera saw the moment Lena walked inside. What it could not capture was the cost that followed.